everybody. Welcome to another Indie Work. Very excited to have all of you here. I'm Doug Zanger, founder, editor-in-chief, Indie Agency News. Why am I trying to sound like a Muppet today? I don't know. It's near the end of the week. I don't know about you. I'm ready for a weekend. So, speaking, yeah. Bringing Kyle O'Brien, managing editor. And I
in need of a weekend.
Well, no, I started doing that. Like, I'm going to do a cartoon voice. And then my mind went to high school.
Oh.
And so French was my minor in college. And I affectionately call it the GPA saver. And, and so in high school, we had a competition. This is outside. So I went to middle school and high school outside of Philadelphia in New Jersey. And so we went up to, I think it was Trenton. And then so we had to give a presentation and we did a newscast, and I was Kermit La Grenouille in doing a newscast. So I was Kermit the Frog in French. Hi ho, Kermit La Grenouille, maintenant nous avons. We got second.
I'm not saying anything further on that.
You know what? Take the laugh. That's how you take the win. You know what those people who won gold are doing? No idea. But my point is always commit to the bit. Kyle has just joined us. Really excited. We've got a lot of things that we are working on right now.
A bunch of.
Yeah, I would say that we are at version 1.6 of this little schmutz. And thank you to all of our members, and your support means a lot. The brief of Indie Agency News is build the global home for independent agencies. The mission is to serve indies and the brilliant people behind them. The goal is more visibility for indies and more choice for marketers. We are the biggest fans of indies, and especially our members. This time last year, we had around 55. Now we're closing in on 220. So thank you for joining this mission. And we are very much mission-based. And we care deeply about our members and the industry at large for indies. Let's do a little sales. Yeah, I love doing these. Our awards scheme, as the Brits like to say, is a little different. I was 15 years in radio. That's why I sound like this. Kyle was in radio for a long time too. That's why he sounds like that.
Yes.
Do this, do that. And so we do a ranking of 40 to 1. But we don't do categories. We do constructs. So the reason we're doing design is Kyle and I are copywriters, and we are constantly, and we're very excited to talk to Gary and Toby, because the design that Lafayette American does, Scorpion Rose Studio does, through the roof. To us, there is still this amazing sense of wonder. This is the place in the industry where there remains a sense of wonder. Us taking a look at talking to creatives and asking them, how did you even come up with that idea? Designers especially. And when we say design, we mean any kind of design. It could be UX or CX. I love production design. And I don't think that gets enough attention. There are a lot of places in design, and especially at indies. And I mean, no disrespect to like the Pentagrams of the world. They're amazing. But when you start digging deeper, you see that design at indie agencies is incredible. So we want to make sure that we're highlighting that. The deadline for entries is a week from tomorrow. And want to thank our jury presidents, the founders of Mrs. and Mr. Kate and Daniel Wadia.
Yeah.
So, and our jury, we're having a little meeting tomorrow. So I'm very, very excited about that. Very, very excited about that. But that's not what we're here for. We're bringing Gary and Toby in. Now, Lafayette American, Detroit, they let's see, you did win an award last year. So we have 3 awards. So creative. You were let's see, Lafayette American, where are you? 11th. And oh my God, hold on. We gotta get into this one, because, and I can tell you right now that it was very close. Like, the scoring on this thing is very, very close. And so there's Toby again, and there's the crew at Lafayette American. We did a nice little interview. This work is remarkable. And Kyle and I are skeptics enough where we don't simply throw that around. we obviously, we said we're the biggest fans of indies, but man, I want to know. I want to understand the background of how this project even got started, and how this how Toledo Museum of Art became a client.
I mean, it was, a true passion project. We had been doing a lot of work in arts and culture space. We've been doing work with the DIA here in Detroit Institute of Art, with the Zeckelman Holocaust Museum, and we'd just done a major rebrand for the Detroit Opera when Gary and his team reached out. Honestly, even though Toledo is only an hour away from Detroit, we didn't know much about it, but we went down there and we were amazed at what I don't even know how to describe that museum. I mean, it just got ranked the #1 museum in the country by USA Today, so maybe that puts it in the context.
I was going to ask about that, but yeah, please continue.
Yeah, so we were kind of blown away by it, and we really wanted to work on it. So it was, they have a great director of the museum, Adam Levine, who is just fabulous. And Gary, when we talked about our shared experience, my wife had worked with him at Donor. We knew lots of the same people from back in the day, and it was just a beautiful marriage. So we were able to do work. I mean, I remember showing him the work and the team saying, well, we could buy the safe work, but why don't we buy the brave work? And they bought the brave work, and the museums really benefit from it, I think.
I mean, let's go into this. Oh my God, look at this.
It's absolutely stunning.
It's so good.
What I want to know is how do you match? I mean, you're an advertising entity. You obviously have great design, but how do you match the incredible design of a world-class museum like this with the work and have it just come out seamless?
It's a great challenge. I mean, you are, to your point, you're framing some of the greatest works. You're framing Caravaggios, you're framing Picasso's with your design work. So it's got to live up to it.
Everyday magic.
No, there's not going to be any music
and while
behind
the Toledo
it. So
Museum
you can keep talking.
has one of the richest.
This is what we call padding.
Got it.
From the community,
it was a big challenge. It was a really fun challenge.
It wants to champion
the interesting thing about the work that we came up with was really a lens.
Everyone belongs.
So when you put it over the work,
the rebrand started by borrowing some of that.
And what's magical about that is
a strategic launch pad.
See artwork, right?
The transformative power
whenever you experience any artwork,
it's Toledo. And it all starts with the letter T.
I think
that has deep roots at the museum.
One of the many powerful things about the campaign.
And now it can symbolize its
and
transformative
so Gary,
future.
give us your background on this, and then we're going to talk a little bit about GLAM Arts here in a second. But yeah, give us your background, because did you graduate from Amherst in '92?
I did go to Amherst in '92 and studied architecture at Yale. So I studied art history when I was in college. So art is kind of my passion.
Inspiration from
as long as I can remember, since I was a young kid.
Sure. Over the years, and the overall design of the typographic system applications were shaped.
So I had a very fortunate career in advertising and design agencies over the decades. But there was an opportunity here in late 2020 to be part of like a pretty significant transformation that was going to take place at the Toledo Museum of Art. This is where I grew up. This museum meant a lot to me in those formative years. Adam Levine, who Toby mentioned, is a young but very ambitious museum director, and he and I really aligned on wanting to bring in a new practice at the museum, which was going to be brand experience. And that was going to bring together marketing, the visitor experience, which is the team that greets you, the store, the cafe, all of that into a holistic experience for visitors. So in order to shape all of that, we had to start at the foundational brand strategy levels, and then start to figure out how can that brand strategy help us start to reinvent visually more than anything else? Because the museum was in a really beautiful place in terms of the previous visual identity, been around for about almost 25 years, but it wasn't really expressing what was needed in terms of the new strategic plan, and the strategic plan at the museum was all about starting to diversify the, who we're inviting into the museum, and really expanding sort of the global representation of the museum's collection. Right. So that was our design challenge, is like, how do we create something that feels like it's much more global, it invites a much more diverse perspectives, and then importantly sort of demonstrates that there's change happening at the museum and that there's dynamism happening in the museum. Right. So that was kind of like the internal mandate.
Yep. No, I like it. So a few things from the crowd here. So, woo, there we go. There's Matthew. And then we got someone here. And then me as an idiot, the audio is playing. The sound is coming through over the top. The audio is making it hard to hear. Pause the video, guys. Oh shit, our bad. So, yeah, sorry everybody. I think my hope is that when I look at the recording that it won't have come through. So, you know what? Life is like the end of a 70s sitcom. You're going to learn something, right? Exactly.
From someone with a bad haircut.
Yeah. So here's a good question from Theo. What's the difference between strategy and the strategic plan?
Well, what I would articulate is that so most museums or cultural institutions are mission driven. So there's a long-standing mission. The mission at Toledo Museum of Art has been around since 1901, with some slight refinements. The strategic plan represents kind of what we're committed to over a 5-year period. And that has just a bunch of different operational commitments. Some of them might be external facing, affect marketing, but there's a lot of sort of where the capital spending is going to go.
Right.
So that's different. From there, we had to translate that strategic plan into marketing strategy. So that was the evolution that we had to start with. And then once we had our brand strategy, then we could start to invite in some potential design and advertising partners.
Okay. Got it. So I'm actually now going to move my hair I'm going to put it into a Gary. So there we go. No, and I just realized I need a haircut. So there you go. This is what I have to do at soccer. And everyone's like, oh, who's the young guy? And then I take my hat off and it's like, oh, he's got gray hair. He's old. Let's see here. No, I appreciate it. Let's see. Oh my gosh, you are the hero, Bruna. Yeah, even the Oscars have tech issues. You know what? They have tech issues, but this was user error. I'm a moron. So the agencies will get into practices. And so it could be a wider niche, it could be a wider vertical, or it could be what we like to call a super niche, which is maybe a smaller subsection of a wider niche or vertical. And this is an interesting space because, Toby, you said earlier that this was about passion. Now, merging passion and impact is really, really critical. And obviously we all have businesses to run. I really would like to understand a little bit more about, this, because cultural institutions have challenges. They have funding challenges, they sometimes have marketing challenges. I want to understand how this is clearly we understand how it's solving a business problem for an organization, for an arts organization, for a cultural organization, but how does it fit in with the wider mission of Lafayette American?
I mean, I think that, we pride ourselves on being an ambitious agency for ambitious partners. And I think that if you look at any cultural institution out there worth its salt, it's really trying to have impact at the community level. It's trying to reach wider audiences. It's trying to reach more diverse audiences. They're constrained by a couple of things, one of which is resources. They've always been, resource stressed. The second is sort of a post-COVID behavior pattern. I don't want to call it an apathy, but it's just like, some flight patterns were broken and people haven't really returned to the arts in person in the way that they, were before.
Yeah.
So they have behavior problems, challenges, they have financial challenges, but they still have a mission, they still have a strategy. And this is an opportunity for us to take our ambition and lean in and helping them achieve theirs, right?
Right.
So, we've all got, deep history as copywriters, art directors, creative directors, helping sell F-150s, helping sell,
Right.
All sorts of, CPG products, taking that and aiming it at a real need that our culture has right now. And we formed GLAM, before the inauguration. Those cultural challenges, those financial challenges are, have just been dialed up.
Right.
So we really see a great opportunity to make a difference, and that's where we're leaning in, right?
Amen, sister.
Great.
Go ahead, Kyle.
You mentioned community. How has the community responded to this? Obviously, you want the client to be happy. Obviously, the work shows for itself, but what has the community responded in the new branding, and how have they kind of taken to it in its various forms?
Sure, I'll jump in on that one. I think measuring success is a huge part of what we want to do at GLAM Arts, and certainly what we did at Toledo Museum of Art. There's various ways to do that. First and foremost, you got to you're working with a variety of different stakeholders. The one of the critical stakeholders was really the staff. The staff really is so mission driven and passionate about this. And if something doesn't land right, you'll start to know and feel it. The staff kind of really sort of saw themselves in this work and felt energized by it. So that was critical. And then you start to go out to the next rung out. We were really trying to connect with a 2-mile radius outside of the museum, which was a really ethnically diverse neighborhood. And there was just a lot of real strong receptivity there. And that's where we saw a lot of the primary visitation growth. So we saw, upwards of 18% growth of visitation sort of in that more diverse subset of Toledo. And then, more broadly speaking, we saw, visitation growth at around 10% over the last couple of years. All, really healthy. The community, board of directors is super strong at the Toledo Museum of Art, super influential, and everybody was behind us. So, it really, it signaled all the right things, and it kind of got people, taking action and getting more invested in the museum. So I would say it was a pretty resounding success with the community.
So, no, and I love that because and Theo brings up a really good point. And, how well do you think missions work as a guide and strategy? And bringing up another point, they're broad, vague, and written by committees. So I'm curious about, and, it sounds like that Toledo has an open-minded board. The tension is the perception that the work that an agency does is advertising instead of communication, if that makes sense, right? So I think there may be some baked in thing of, well, we don't like advertising, and it's like, well, you kind of, or we have to do advertising. How do you break through when you have? How do you explain that the communication piece of this is important? So it's advertising, it is marketing. To your point, the staff is a huge. People forget the staff often. How do you work through that? How do you explain the efficacy of really being more sophisticated in marketing to either an executive director, board of directors, et cetera? I mean, just to jump in, it really helped in this particular case that Gary is, an experienced marketer. Right. So, and Adam really entrusted him to kind of bring this work to the next level. So, but I think that you're absolutely right. Back in the day, I worked on the Whitney Museum, and we would go in and sit across the table from curators, and the vibe was just so kind of nasty because they were pure and we were impure, So, you just had to win their trust over time by doing the things that we do as marketers, right? We listen and we ask and we probe and we're curious and we build carefully. The board at Toledo Museum of Art couldn't have been better, and Adam's leadership really kind of
kept things steady and allowed us to make progress. But you really do need, to proceed carefully. You can't be arrogant. You can't say, well, just because you sold X, you can, do this. Every cultural institution is different. Every community that they represent is different. And they're really, rich and profound institutions, culturally rich and profound institutions that take some time to get to know.
Right.
And I'll, to build on what Toby was mentioning, I'll broaden it out a little bit beyond Toledo Museum of Art. So I've been a part of there's an organization called AMA, which is the Art Museum Marketing Association.
Right.
And, across those peers who are marketing leaders across, all the top museums in the country here, what you're talking about is true. I mean, there are some almost, I would call them, traditional cliches around, what you would think museum management is like. But there's also a really new generation of museum leadership emerging across the country that is way savvier about, how to manage budgets, really do community engagement, really interested in brand, very, very focused on success metrics. So, the simple answer to what you're saying is that, all these museums want to increase visitation. And one of the strongest way to increase visitation is to have more sort of a lovable and effective marketing. So therefore, places that are really focused on the numbers, they're going to care about marketing and they're going to value that and they're going to invest in that. So you just got to make sure that you're aligned with the right culture.
We're going to ask one last question, then it's a quiz for you, Gary. This whole platform is like a morning radio show, so just deal with it. If you, what would you say to an executive director, a leadership team at a cultural institution that is, maybe they're stuck, maybe they're nervous. It could be a combination of a lot of different things that have accumulated over time. What would you say to them as it relates to this idea of reach out to us so we can have an initial conversation? What would that initial conversation with that team be as it relates to GLAM Arts?
I would say that it starts with some of what we talked about is really understanding, how has the mission at the museum or the organization been translated into the brand and marketing strategies that they do have. So that's going to be your first signal. If they've done some of that translation work already, great. Then we can kind of grease the skids towards the next step of discussion. But if they haven't, that's where you really want to start. And then secondly, I think the other part of it is just really understanding kind of where they're, how much do they really understand kind of the data dynamics around visitation? Do they really have a good comprehension of who their visitors are and where those visitors are coming from? Mm-hmm. How many of them are repeat visitors, et cetera? And so you'd want to be able to really audit that data to understand kind of if you're going to create visitation growth, where is it coming from? Is it kind of going, deeper and getting more, sort of resourcing, more new visitors to come, or is it really about sort of increasing repeat visitation if visitation is strong? So I think it kind of starts there and just trying to understanding how much of those things have really been, unearthed versus they need some work.
Right. I want to jump in and say also, if I'm talking to an institution, there are not many opportunities that they're going to have to tap into someone with Gary's experience, right? I mean, usually when people escape from advertising and disappear into organizations like TMA, they're free. They're done. They're gone. There are very few, examples of people actually coming back,
right,
and bringing those lessons and bringing that depth of knowledge and that industry expertise. So, Gary brings not only the wealth of his marketing experience, but actually now a really deep knowledge about how to bring this expertise to bear and make a difference at a cultural institution. Yeah. So if you take that and you combine it with what we've been doing in Lafayette America and the success that we've had with design and media and marketing for these institutions, I think that it's a great opportunity for them to have somebody working with them who has empathy and efficacy, right?
100%. All right. All right. Quiz time. All right, Gary, let's look at that Amherst. All right, we're going with Icelandic artists. Who is considered one of the leaders of the Icelandic contemporary movement?
Well, obviously it'd be Olafur Eliasson. You know, he's
Olafur Eliasson is a good one, but there's another one as well.
Ragnar?
Ragnar? There's always a Ragnar.
Isn't there Ragnar?
Well, Olafur Eliasson, but the original was Thorin Thorliksson. So let's go ahead and show this here. Let's see, oh, I'm in the wrong window here. I have this like unhealthy fascination with Iceland. So and we have members there, Brandenburg. So yeah, there you go. Thorin B. Thorliksson, and the name of this painting is Thingvellir. And then you had mentioned Olafur Eliasson, so the Weather Project from 2003. I tend to be I like French Impressionism, mainly because French was my minor, aka GPA saver. But also, we used to go to the Barnes Museum in Philadelphia.
I love the old Barnes Museum.
Yeah, the old Barnes Institute. Yeah.
The new one's nice too. The new one's nice too.
No, the old one was out by Villanova. So
yeah,
you get your Philly accent there. Yeah, that was our thing. And so yeah, it's remarkable. I'm a bit of a Gauguin, like a little bit of Gauguin.
Nice.
Gary, do you have a particular? Oh, here's a question, and Kyle, you're going to ask a question too. Is there an era that is critically underrated and underappreciated? Whether that is an era or a movement that is underappreciated, in your opinion?
I would say not so much an era, but maybe a region. You know, because that's one way I would qualify that. I mean, there's very little known about Latin American indigenous arts, you know, and I think that's a really sort of powerfully emerging area of discovery. You know, there's been a lot of work done on African arts over the last couple of decades, and sort of oceanic arts have really emerged and stuff. But Latin American sort of indigenous arts it's still just taking a while to kind of unearth, you know, the scholarship on that and kind of the artifacts and such. But that's where I would say there's still, you know, some underappreciation.
I was just reading a great book about Latin American indigenous papermaking and its ties to, you know, pre-Columbian papermaking. Right?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And its ties to witchcraft.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Really, really cool. Actually, I think I have a book. I think I'm sitting on a book.
Right. Well, the phrase that kicks Kyle off is Latin America. That was the word today. No, actually, he had another meeting. I told you, it's like a morning show here. What about Detroit? Detroit is an incredibly artistic place. It is a very, very, very creative place. And what I love about it, again, I mentioned the Philly thing recently in Boston. Detroit, there is a kinship between places like that, where there is an inherent tension in the area, a little bit of a chip on our shoulders. Even though I've been in Portland 33 years, you can't take the jersey out of the boy. Talk about the Detroit scene right now, because it's always been emergent musically. Obviously, did extraordinarily well for a very long time, and has for a very, very long time. But what's the vibe in Detroit now?
I mean, I think it's a really, really interesting time to be here. I mean, if you look at things like the Michigan Central Station renovation, and if you come and walk through that space and realize that was a big hulking ruin a decade ago, and see how it's come back. If you look at what's happening downtown with, you know, all the work that's been going, the book building just opened again, renovated, completely gorgeous. So you've got this kind of intense renewal. At the same time, you still actually have a really strong music and art scene, right? So Art Club is an interesting organization. I encourage anyone to check it out, which allows you to kind of shop for really, emerging artists. It's CL. The club is spelled with a V. They have a really interesting app that kind of shares mostly Midwest and Detroit artists, at least as far as I've seen. And then, the music scene, I mean, if you go to Spotlight on any weekend, you're going to hear amazing DJs, and the movie festival lineup is incredible this year. So, the feeling of this town, again, new administration, this town's going to be hit hard by tariffs if they hit.
Yep.
So there's a tentativeness. I think it's always a bit of a tender town, but it's been a really exciting town to be in for the last few years.
Yeah, but you know what? The hustle, the fight, that never goes away.
Pistons are looking amazing.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And again, thank you so much for supporting this mission. Much, much more to come. I'm going to have you sit backstage for a second as I wrap this thing up, but this is great. And I can't wait to see where you take this.
Cool.
Right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Hang on. This isn't a Zoom call. Hang on. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again. A reminder that the top 40 design entries are open until a week from tomorrow. If it's anything to do with design, we would love to see it. Go to indieagency.news, click on top 40, and you'll get there. On behalf of everybody at Indie Agency News, including Kyle O'Brien, Shannon Miller, and Jess Ferris, I'm Doug Zanger. See you next time.